I got a question for you, Cosmic. So
Yeah,
you're
what's up?
listening and you've researched a lot about Steve Jobs. What was the thing where you were like the final kind of straw, quote unquote, where it was like, you know what, this guy is just so that he's just fucked up, like
I
far
mean, it
gone.
was it
Like
was
it's
probably
over.
the hamburger story, but before that, I will tell you there is something that is arguably worse, because it has a much more lasting effect on his relationship with his daughter, and it really sets the tone for, like how terrible he is and how much he does at the expense of others. And this I'll get into like some things later because there's a couple of things that are connected to Apple going public that really show his true colors and how he treats people. But when his daughter was born, the mother of his child, he refused to acknowledge the birth of his daughter, and he did not talk to the mother or anything. And she was like applying for food stamps and struggling for a very long time. And
Wow.
Steve Jobs at that point was worth millions of dollars. Not quite as much yet, but we'll get there, trust me. And eventually the state of California realized, why are we paying for like the food for Steve Jobs' kid? He should be supporting the mother. So the state of California sues him and says,
Oh,
"Hey,
shit.
what the fuck?" And
Hey,
then so
jackass.
he finally decides to acknowledge this and then quickly gets his lawyers to lock down the deal because days or weeks or whatever later, Apple goes public and his value rises to like $250 million. So he has his lawyers lock down the deal early so that he has to pay less child support.
Gangster.
Wow.
Gangster move.
Now, and this is the shit that pissed me off about the biography by Walter Isaacson, is that Isaacson never comes out and says this. Like, and he never talks about the implications of it. He says, Steve figured that since Apple was going public, he might as well get the deal on with. And then after all this is done, he goes about his life, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, are we really just glossing over the fact that like he refuses to support his child as much as he could? Right? Like he ignores her for months, or I don't actually
Years.
remember how long he ignores her for.
Weeks,
Maybe
months,
it's
years. Same thing.
But it's like, what the fuck, bro? And then here's the other thing is that somebody that was pretty close to him in Apple was not a salaried employee. I think they were an hourly employee, or maybe they were like just underneath a certain tier of salary. So at the position that they were at, when Apple went public, they did not have a lot of stock options. So they were not amongst I think it was Kotke was his last name. But he did not become a millionaire like a lot of the other people that were closely involved with the founding of Apple because of the position that he was in. So he kind of confronts Jobs about this, and Jobs just tells him, well, you're not in a high enough position to benefit from it. And Wozniak or somebody else says to Jobs, listen, dude, I'll match, like, we need to give him some options, like he's your friend, blah, blah, blah. I'll match the amount of stocks, or like I'll match the amount of stocks that you give him. And Steve goes, okay, then I'll give him 0. And like,
Get fucking
holy fuck, dude. Like, this is somebody that considered him a friend, considered him like,
Wow.
a good boss and everything. And, this person is Kotke, again, I believe is his name. He's quoted as, I think, saying like, he really just will toss you out with the trash, essentially. Or like he'll just use you to get ahead. And it's very clear. The other thing too, with Apple going public and like him acknowledging his daughter, but still being like ashamed of it, is that at some point Time Magazine sent a journalist over to Apple to interview a bunch of people. And Steve was convinced that he was going to be Man of the Year that year. Now, this was never the case. Time had never communicated this to him. They had decided before any of this happened that the computer was going to be the machine of the year, because they realized that they could not personify, like no one person personified the computer at that point. So they went with the inanimate object of the computer and talked about the different people that were working in computing at that time. And somebody like the journalist asked somebody at Apple if Steve if Steve had named the computer the Lisa after his daughter, and the person was like, "Yeah, of course." And because Steve denied this, he named the computer the Lisa, and it was like, "No, it's not named after my daughter." And so the guy was like, so the employee was like, "Yeah, of course it's named after his daughter. Like, what are we talking about here?" And Steve, like, Jobs was furious when he found out about this. Like, it was, and the guy that they interviewed about it, he was like, "Look, dude, I'm not going to let my friend deny being a father. Like, I'm not going to let him deny what is really going on here." And
remember, kids,
Jobs was now
billionaires
convinced.
don't have friends. Continue.
It's true. And like Jobs was convinced that because of like the things that the people at his company had said, and because of the terrible writing that the journalist had done, he was scrapped from being man of the year, and he was, burned and all that sort of shit. And it's just like, no, dude, you were never man of the year. It was never happening, bro. Like
Delulu land, as they say.
He was delusional. Also, fun fact, when the Lisa was being launched, they told him to not talk about the Macintosh in the interviews and like the press tours that he did. And guess what he did? He talked about the Macintosh, even though the Macintosh was set to come out like 2 years after the Lisa. So he was trying to dead on arrival the Lisa, And the way that he treats this team of people that are working on the Lisa, as well as the project itself, really speaks to the parallel between how he views that inanimate object and how he views it like as a inconvenience, essentially, and how he views his daughter, which is that they are basically one and the same at this point. When the Lisa is like discontinued after a while, he tells the Lisa team that they're going to, like, quarter of them are going to be laid off. And he's like, "You guys made a bad product." And it's like, you've been fucking dogging us at every turn, dude. You've been trying to crush the Lisa ever since you started working on the Macintosh. What are you talking about? Like, there was a lot, dude. There's a lot in that fucking book that he's just a garbage human being. It's so fucking bad.
And the pirate flag represents the Macintosh, not the Lisa, by the way, for those. Tying back to the pirate flag, I remembered the other thing.
Yeah.
Because there was two different like buildings.
It was also because they flew it also because like Steve and his, company viewed themselves as pirates essentially, or rebels. Yeah.
They were more rebellious.
Rebelling against.
They're rebellious and
Tech,
innovative.
They called them. They said that they were rebelling against Big Blue, which was IBM at the time.
Yeah.
So like
they weren't, by the way.
I just feel like
they innovated
like,
to the most bland product of all fucking time. Continue, Cole.
Yeah.
Oh shit. I feel like that's just like young people who start tech companies and then get rich are just so weird.
Yeah.
Like
young people who get
fucking-
rich are so weird.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true too.
That's also true.
But I guess you kind of just notice it with the tech people because they're kind of like, they like to be in your face, sort of